If rhetoric could power Scotland, we could replace Torness by hitching Mr Russell to the grid. Wind turbines suffer from intermittency, but not the Cabinet Secretary. From his lips flow a limitless and inexhaustible torrent of self-justification and self-aggrandisement. We've been told this morning that the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence is going splendidly. That's presumably why one teaching union has been thrown off the management board, while another believes the introduction of the new qualifications should be delayed by another year. That's why there are continuing concerns about moderation, why Scotland has been withdrawn from international comparisons, and why the inspectors have been taken away from their statutory role and thrown into the schools as shock troops to prop up the implementation process. The debate today on the rollout of Curriculum for Excellence comes in a week in which the Cabinet have been negotiating with COSLA about limiting reductions in teacher numbers next year to a maximum of 1,500. This comes on top of reductions this year, the precise figure for which will be known in a few weeks' time, and reductions in past years that resulted in the previous Cabinet Secretary being replaced. The Government has shown to be complicit in bypassing negotiating machinery with the intention of presenting teachers with imposed changes to their terms and conditions as set out in the Macron Agreement, together with a pay freeze. By congratulating the profession out of one side of his mouth, while bargaining their jobs and conditions away with the other, the Cabinet Secretary is sacrificing whatever trust remains, making the process of delivering Curriculum for Excellence much more difficult from now on than it ever has been before. But even before the Government's shabby COSLA deal, management of the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence was weak and inconsistent. If we roll back to 2005, there was a broad consensus, built up through full consultation and discussion, that change was required in order to equip pupils to compete more effectively in a changing world. There were features we all wanted to retain. The flexibility which already exists in the Scottish system, no one was arguing for a more prescriptive national system. The combination of breadth and depth offered in curriculum, the quality of teaching in our schools, the quality of supporting material that helps teachers deliver much of the current curriculum, and above all, adherence to the comprehensive principle. At the same time, there was a consensus in favour of change which would reduce overcrowding in the curriculum and make learning more enjoyable, better connect the various stages of the curriculum from 3 to 18, achieve a better balance between academic and vocational subjects, and include a wider range of experiences. Equip young people with the skills they will need in tomorrow's workforce, make sure that assessment and certification support learning, and allow more choice to meet the needs of individual young people. The whole purpose of Curriculum for Excellence was to introduce these changes without losing the strengths of the current system. There was very substantial agreement about what we needed to do in order to achieve this, and we had the recommendations of an influential OECD report to guide us. The absolute pre-requirement for successful implementation was to secure the full commitment and participation of the teaching workforce. This in turn meant well-staffed and well-run schools, support for reskilling and encouraging creativity amongst teachers through continuing professional development, improved pedagogy through mechanisms such as active learning, cooperative learning, better use of ICT, more focus on the needs of the pupil through, for example, use of real-life experiences, better connections between subject disciplines to ensure young people make necessary connections in their learning, guidelines for schools and teachers, possibly in the form of an outline national curriculum, leaving the system flexible and creative, an examination structure that underpinned all this flexibility and creativity while enabling pupil progress to be measured. Now, I'm not going to say or claim that all the problems began in 2007, but certainly in the period since then, there have been major problems in the implementation of Curriculum for Excellence. Amongst the most damaging have been the absence of proper guidelines. The documents produced were overlong and too complicated, leaving schools across the country struggling to interpret what the key concepts how the key concepts might be applied in practice. The commissioning of summary documents by the Minister is an implicit admission that the original documents were not fit for purpose, but concerns about a lack of clarity, especially around assessment arrangements and the timetable for the new qualifications, remain. The Management Board, whatever the Minister says, has not been an effective vehicle to drive forward change. It appears that political considerations rather than educational ones predominate in the minds of the Minister, and the role of the Board is widely seen amongst the profession to be that of a rubber stamp. The role and status of key organisations in delivering curriculum for excellence is confusing and has been subject to sudden change at ministerial behest. The decision to merge Learning and Teaching Scotland with HMIE is the most dramatic example. There was no prior consultation with either organisation or the wider educational community. Maybe the Cabinet Secretary was trying to rectify the very evident lack of coordination between the two bodies, reflected in the failure to match up Journey for Excellence, the very good resource and staff development tool produced by HMIE, with the educational psychobabble contained in the vacuous statement of experiences and outcomes coming from LTS, which has led to a loss of confidence amongst teachers and schools in the management of the overall process. The consultation on the new qualifications was mishandled. It sent out two messages. Firstly, that the higher will remain the gold standard, and secondly, that the government would prevent schools presenting cohorts of students for certification before S4. The transmission of these messages resulted in two main problems that have bedevilled the implementation process ever since. Teachers up and down the country want to know what the exams will look like, quite understandably, and they've been looking for materials similar to the materials they're familiar with under the current arrangements to support the new exams, even though that is at variance with the approach envisaged in the Curriculum for Excellence. The straitjacket that prevented schools that wanted and can manage earlier presentation caused one set of problems, but the clarification from the Cabinet Secretary reported in TES last week could end up making matters worse. If the Cabinet Secretary's U-turn has the effect of allowing schools up and down the country to move from S3-4 to S2-3, the whole coherence of Curriculum for Excellence will be jeopardised. Materials being produced by Learning and Teaching Scotland as exemplars have not been tried and tested. Much of it is of variable quality, and only a small proportion of it has actually been kite-marked. And many teachers have reported difficulties in accessing suitable material on the LTS website, as we can see in the TES last week. The quality of CPD is not what was promised due to a lack of effective coordination by the National CPD Group. There is a lack of clarity about moderation arrangements, which was a major subject of concern at the Association of Primary Heads Conference last Friday. And in the absence of guidance, schools are being left to interpret what CFE means for them, developing their own curriculum models, because there's very little coordination, even at local authority level, never mind Scotland-wide. Now, the ministerial response to these problems seemed to be either to deny that they exist, which we've heard this morning, or to come up with gimmicks, some of which have backfired spectacularly. The 10-point plan, the suspension of inspections and deployment of HME to support schools, with schools being asked to put their hands up if they need help, has not delivered for anybody, I don't think. The withdrawal of Scotland from international comparative benchmarking of pupil performance leaves Scottish parents with no yardstick against which they can judge the performance of the system as opposed to their child's school until the equivalent of standard grade. I think that's disgraceful. I believe the CFE has been diluted, and instead of schools being encouraged to be ambitious, too many of them have become risk-averse, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. No doubt the Cabinet Secretary will accuse me and my colleagues of being negative, but bluntly, his statement demonstrates very clearly that this emperor has new clothes. If you want to look at the blogs in the TES. See what rank-and-file teachers are saying is going on in the schools. Many of them privately are deeply worried about where the implementation of CFE has been allowed to drift. If you add that onto the assault on teachers and education, which the Cabinet has been bargaining for, the augurs for the successful implementation of Curriculum for Excellence are not promising. So, being optimistic, what does the government need to do? I think the key thing is to make sure that assessment and certification support learning and not the other way around. Exam structures and content need to reflect the needs of pupils and what teachers, using their professional judgment, feel is best to teach. For too long, we've focused too heavily on examinations to the detriment of teaching young people skills. We need to escape the domination of examinations to the detriment of all other considerations. We do need a robust examination system and to measure the performance of individual pupils. That's absolutely essential. but our school system needs to deliver much more if some of our young people are not to be left behind. Let's use Curriculum for Excellence to achieve a better balance between academic and vocational subjects and include a wider range of experiences to equip young people with the skills they will need in tomorrow's workforce and allow more choice to take forward the needs of individual young people. CPD should not just be aimed at upgrading subject skills. The focus should be on pedagogy, improving their skills as teachers. And we need to involve parents as well as professionals in taking forward the reform, explaining its implications at every turn. Presiding Officer, it would be a serious mistake if we were to agree today that the Curriculum for Excellence is being successfully rolled out. It is not. There are many teachers and schools who are taking forward the reform very successfully and delivering sound education. I congratulate them on their work. But the management of the implementation by this government has been gaffe-prone, complacent and incompetent. The loss of teachers, the threat to conditions of service will put the whole process at risk. I move the amendment in my name. Thank you.